Favorite ice cream flavor is mint chocolate. Is mint chocolate chip.
Do you need a few minutes to calm
Yeah, you need a
down?
few minutes.
Content.
What's going on, guys? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the OCA Youth Podcast. I'm here with 4 other members. Today's topic is about AAPI parenting styles and traditions, and also we're going to mention the generational gap and have our own discussion about it. Just going with introductions first.
Hi, my name's Ian. I'm a rising junior, and my favorite ice cream flavor is vanilla.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Ryan. I'm a rising junior, and also my favorite ice cream flavor is vanilla.
Wow. I'm Alejandro. I'm a rising junior as well, and my favorite ice cream flavor is vanilla.
My name's Sid. I'm a rising junior as well, and my favorite ice cream flavor is chocolate.
Hi, I'm Dylan. I'm a rising junior, and my favorite ice cream flavor is mint chocolate chip.
Great, so let's get started. So today's topic is about AAPI parenting, and I just wanted to emphasize that, in our previous podcast, I think it was 2 podcasts ago about monominority, we talked or had a brief discussion about AAPI parents and just the stereotype that our parents are, because they were quote-unquote first-class immigrants, they developed a certain work ethic and tradition on, working hard and, trying your best and everything. But also with that downside of, in our other podcast about mental health, we talked about how parents, the stereotype of the parents, kind of pushing down on mental health and kind of laying low on that topic instead of, spreading self-awareness and actually talking about mental health. And I just wanted to ask you guys about, does your parents fit into that mold? Or I know it doesn't, but I just want to know your experiences on why they don't and just how your parents are actually in real life instead of, focusing on that stereotype.
Well, I think the stereotype itself is kind of about that idea that our parents kind of push us hard to succeed in all aspects of life, all school and all of that. And while I think to a certain extent, yes, our parents want us to succeed, it's not that level of tiger parenting for everyone. It's different for everyone. And I think, at least for me, it's more like my parents want me to succeed, but they also understand things don't always go as planned, and you have to kind of work through that and get past it.
Just the base on that tiger parenting you said there, it's a term that's easily used by a lot of people on, the 2 parents, pushing down on their child, study hard every day, 24/7, 365, all that. But in real life, honestly, a student goes through their own personal experiences, and because of those personal experiences, everyone is different. So the talk of mental health and the preservation of self-identity is different for everybody. When we're talking about tiger parenting, not every Asian, and I'm gonna say this again, not every Asian has tiger parents, okay? Parents that understand what their child is passionate about and what they really want to do in life instead of, cracking them down just to, study harder on a math test or something so stereotypically, I would say, academic. I think tiger parenting is just this false label that also falls onto the AAPI, that's this model minority idea. And I think part of this podcast and, overall is just to spread awareness on how that isn't true and how we are all different people and how we also want to spread awareness on the fact that we do preserve our mental health and we do prioritize our self-identity sometimes over academics or, our work ethics.
And I think it's also important to note that our parents, while there is obviously a level of pushing you to succeed, they also understand you're doing your best, you're trying. There's no kind of that hounding aspect that I feel like a lot of people have that vision in their mind that our parents are there trying to make sure every single math test you're sitting down, you're studying, you're making sure you're doing it. There's, at least for my experiences, I can't speak to all of our experiences, but I feel like my parents kind of have some level of trust that I'm doing the best I can. And if the results don't come out how I wanted, how they wanted, they understand it's not the end of the world. They understand that, and we kind of move on. But the one thing that they're always very vocal about is me making sure that I don't just kind of breeze past a bad result, and I focus on why that it ended up that way.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. So my parents, obviously, I'm not Asian. I'm not part of the AAPI community. Yeah. But to kind of add some perspective to that, I'm Mexican, first generation. So only family to live here. The rest lives in Mexico. So my parents are kind of similar to what Sid was describing. My parents obviously want me to succeed. They don't have they didn't have the opportunities that are available here in the United States. So they kind of want to see their future generations, their son and whatever comes after that, kind of succeed in a way that they couldn't almost. But they also understand that this is my life. They're kind of like respectful of the fact that I have my own destiny, I have my own path. And, you know, like Sid was saying, they understand that if I fail or come up short of their expectations or my own expectations, they understand that it's not the end of the world, that we keep moving on and, you know, eventually it'll work out.
I think that like a lot of parents, like my own, they can accept the fact that like they can't push their child to fit into their like mold, their perfect mold, and once they accept that, they won't push you as hard to exceed their expectations, and they'll be accepting of the fact that you can live your own life, you can chase your own dreams, you don't have to study this just because they want you to, and they can like let you live your life freely.
Yeah, and just about emphasizing the point on it's, you know, your life, you want to follow your passions, right? I feel like I learned that lesson a little bit too late. I mean, I said this twice already, but if I go back to the part of the podcast where I mentioned that I didn't get into honors math in 7th grade, as I mentioned like 20 times, there was this moment, this feeling of, you know, did I fail my parents? Did I fail just in general? Because the unreasonable expectations my parents, I thought my parents put on me, which in reality they didn't, it all, I think, came from that stereotype of you know, my friends probably have the strictest parents in the world, and, you know, they're probably pushing them to do 15 math pages a day and more homework and, you know, and even more work and all that for math at such a young age. And I feel like that stereotype kind of lived within me, especially throughout 7th grade, thinking that all my other parents, all my friends' parents, Asian parents are stricter. But in reality, it really wasn't. It was honestly just about my work ethic in 6th grade. And I just wanted to know your guys' experiences on, has this stereotype, you know, really affected you in any like sort of personal way, especially during academics, or thinking that, you know, oh, I failed my parents because this expectation put on me was too high? Like, did you guys ever feel that way?
While I don't feel like I felt that way specifically, one thing that I think was especially interesting about what you were saying was in terms of our parents and that idea that our parents are pushing us to do better. In some ways, it kind of detracts from our own personal accomplishments, in that, especially in the eyes of others, as many people see it as, oh, their parents are pushing them to do well, that's why they're doing well. And in some ways, it feels like it sometimes detracts from, I did that, from the fact that you were able to accomplish something, because people's assumptions aren't that you worked really hard for it, it's that your parents pushed you to work really hard for it.
I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily fail, but like let down, because, you know, you as a person, you're gonna have high expectations, and obviously you want to strive for like the best courses, and, you know, letting them down is obviously a really bad thing, but, you know, you're gonna learn things from that, because you're obviously gonna strive to become a better person. So yeah.
I think to add on to that, like there are definitely many experiences where like you do well on something, and you feel good about yourself, but then you realize that somebody else has done better, and you feel like you let yourself down. I'm not gonna call anybody out, but like if you do like well on a math test, like you get a 90, and you hear that somebody else got like a 95, you feel like you could have done a lot better, even though a 90 is a really good score, and you should be proud of yourself. But it definitely takes away from that fact.
Yeah, especially in kind of like the school atmosphere, at least at the school that I go to. It's a very competitive school academically, I guess. And you know, it's almost like it supersedes the fact, like my parents have their own expectations, and then I have my own expectations for myself. So like it's almost like I'm letting like 3 people down, you know, my mom, my dad, and myself. It's tough to get over, but I guess with the support that we were mentioning, the understanding that like you could keep going, it's not the end of the world, like that understanding, it helps me get through it a lot. Even though I like let myself down sometimes, you know, it's easier to get back up with that support.
Yeah, and with all these unreasonable expectations, I think, put on me at such a young age, I also learned quickly that my mom is, when she was young, and I'm sure she meant this playfully, but she would love to compare me to literally everyone else on the planet. So if I got like a 96 on a math test, she would say, "Why didn't you get 100? Like, you know, careless mistake. Could have got 100. Could have got an A plus. Could have done all that. Oh, your friend did. Let's say, oh, Sid got 100. Why didn't you get 100? You're not smart like Sid." And I'm sure she meant that in a playful manner. But I think overall it did harm me a little bit, as when I was young I didn't really get jokes as well as I do now. But I did learn the fact that my mother used to, and before she came to America, I learned about this game she played in high school where she would just compare, test scores and just even gym scores, which they weren't good at gym at all, but they would compare math scores and all that. But I think the important thing there was she brought that over kind of to where I was at and kind of played that game with me, expecting me to do better and putting those expectations on myself. And I just feel like that comparison is also like with part of those expectations that, my mom put on me. I feel that the AAPI, stereotype that, parents get, that they like get to you in certain ways in terms of comparing you to your peers, and I do think that's very, that really impacts your mental health very negatively. It's very harmful to you.
I mean, getting into that idea of like comparison, one important thing also to consider, I know this is true for my parents, in the schools that they went to, how well you did on a test wasn't a secret. It was posted on a list where everyone's rankings was posted, and if you failed, if you did the worst in the entire school, everyone knew it.
Yeah.
So there's that idea that they also, it's not really a secret, and there's also that feeling like, why should it be a secret? Because the way they were brought up, it was always like, it's open, it is what it is, and why is there not it's also very different here. And I know this is something Ollie said earlier in terms of opportunities here where we live and here in America compared to wherever our parents might have grown up, because they were immigrants. They immigrated from another country. For my parents, they came from India, and the range of opportunities that are available to me it's incredible, really, compared to what a child in India might be getting at their school. And I feel like part of it is my parents want me to acknowledge the fact that I'm privileged to be here, I'm privileged to get these opportunities, and that kind of feeds into that idea that I should be doing well because I'm getting so much more than these kids are getting in other places, so make the most of it, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that idea of privilege also plays in very well. I think my parents definitely emphasized multiple times that I am a very, very lucky kid. I was raised in a great household, a great family. I go and have the greatest friends of all time. I go to a great school and I have all these opportunities where maybe somewhere else someone doesn't have those opportunities as Sid said. But I think that idea of privilege also could be interfering in the way of, how you perform and how you think of yourself just as a whole. You could be, there's a kid, in somewhere else that could be doing better than you, and because you're privileged and you have these opportunities, why aren't you like taking advantage of those opportunities? And sometimes that kind of supersedes this feeling of, you accomplished something yourself, go celebrate it. Like if you did an accomplishment, you should go celebrate it instead of comparing yourself to somewhere else. No matter where you are, right? You are privileged. You do have those opportunities. You should take advantage of them. But that also shouldn't interfere with oh, I did something. I should be proud of myself. That feeling of proud and satisfaction should never be interfered with by other people or other peers. You should always focus on yourself. I wanted to point that out as well.
And at the center of that idea is really that there's a difference between acknowledging your privilege and kind of comparing yourself to others that don't necessarily have the privilege. And it's important to acknowledge, but comparing can sometimes lead to a negative place for yourself.
Yeah.
I think like another point is like this expectation also like translates to other areas of life, like in sports. Like if you win a match, like in my sport wrestling, if you win a match, you're always going to compare it to your teammates. Like you could win a match by like points, but your teammate could win a match by pin. So you feel like you let down because you're not getting as many points for your team. And you're always comparing yourself to other people and your losses and your wins. So you can never truly feel good about your win because there's always somebody who maybe won better or won more points for the team. So it just like translates to other areas of life.
Yeah, so I mean, earlier in the podcast, I mentioned that we were going to talk about generational gap. Look, these two topics definitely intertwine, definitely as well. But what I do want to, focus on is that, for first class immigrants, there's a stereotype of, their ideas, coming over to this country and, bringing their work ethic and, their parenting styles over. But one thing I haven't, noticed about anyone talking about is how that first class, like the first class immigrants or your parents, kind of involve themselves in mental health discussions. I just want to bring that up as well. I just want to ask you guys, what are your experiences on your parents, speaking out about your mental health and your self-identity? And I just wanted to know if your parents or if you had any experiences of your parents, trying to preserve that self-identity.
Before we get into the generation gap and all, just keeping to the topic that we had earlier in terms of our parents and their expectations, one important thing that I think we didn't really mention too much is expectations when it comes to college and what you're going to do with college. What are you going to major in? What are you going to become later in your life? And there's this stereotype that involves Asians that our parents want us to go and become a doctor, an engineer or something, especially as an Indian. That's kind of that stereotype that Indians either become doctors or engineers. And I feel like it's important to acknowledge that stereotype doesn't come from our parents. That, at least in my case, I felt like my parents neither of them are in either of those career paths, and they don't really push us too much to get into, either me or my sister, to get into any of those career paths. But I'm just interested to get your take on that.
Yeah, just about the question I asked before, let's just move that to the side. I totally agree with you bringing up college and the expectations that come with it. I know that stereotypically, Asians or the AAPI, group, the parents could be stereotyped as, going into STEM or going into medicine, pre-med and all that. But I just want to let, everyone know that my parents definitely don't support that in terms of that negative stereotype of you have to be, what we want you to be. No, it's you follow your own passion, right? Look, I love public policy, I love economics, I love international domestic policy, all of that. That doesn't fit into that mold of STEM or any of that stereotype, and my parents said, go for it. Like, that angle of where I want to apply to college for, like, they would completely support that, and I feel that that's also one of the, and going back to that question where I said about mental health, I think that pushing a child or a teenager into something they don't want to do definitely, negatively affects their mental health and their self-identity. That it just doesn't work, right? And I think when my parents told me, to do, I wouldn't say whatever you want, but I'd say do what you're passionate about. I think them bringing that up really helped me focus on what I wanted to do in the future, and I think that was extremely beneficial for me.
Yeah, and also like bringing it back, I guess, like adding more perspective. In Mexico, like there's 2 viable colleges if you want to do like anything outside of like agriculture or like a set like economic or like a set job. So it's either Monterrey or you go to Mexico City. And both my parents got scholarships to Monterrey because they couldn't afford it. And so they both went. They became engineers, and my dad eventually got an internship for Citibank, and that's how he got his work visa to move here. But like I guess they didn't have like the paths available that we have. You feel me? So like they understand that there's a wide variety of things, and they respect that I can have my own passion if I want to. But they're telling like what the one thing they want me to do is take advantage of that opportunity, which I understand. You know what I'm saying? Because they never had that, so they just want me to at least take advantage of it. There's so much I can do. They respect what I'm gonna do, whatever I do, but at least I have to do something respectively, So yeah.
Yeah, I think that the main source of that expectation that you have to become a doctor, an engineer, is because, like Ollie said, like parents like often don't have that much and they don't start out from much. So in turn, they want their child to succeed in life and get a stable job and have a nice paying job so that they don't have to have the same struggles that they had. And so I think that's where like the stereotype and the expectation comes from, that you have to do well because they just want you to have like the best life that you can.
Yeah.
I think also the expectation of doing really well stems from, it's almost the idea like you have to pay your parents back because they did so much for you, to be in that position, having you and then raising you, and like we're all pretty fortunate of like a living space, right? So it's almost like we have to repay them back because they sacrificed so much for us to have so much more opportunity and privileges.
And at least for me, I know in terms of what I want to do later, I want to go into computer science, which is very much fitting into that stereotype. But one thing that annoys me about it is anytime someone asks, what do you want to do? And I respond with computer science, there's always that follow-up question, oh, your parents wanted you to do that? And no, my parents didn't want me to do that. They didn't care what I chose to do. And there's this idea coming from outside sources, which kind of made me realize it's not as much about our parents' expectations put on us. It's the perception of our parents' expectations that are being put on us that's more harmful than anything that's actually happening.
Yeah, I just want to point out the perception, right? I mean, that stereotype completely exists in the real world, and I had multiple questions about, because I'm going into junior year, and then by that time you should know, like you should be thinking about, what do you want to do for the future? And I got multiple questions saying, you're gonna be a chemist like your dad. He actually majored in chemistry, but now he's in business. Or do you want to do pre-med, or do you want to, go into computer science? Because I took a computer science class and I did well in it. And so my friends would ask me, are you gonna major in computer science? And I mean, the plain answer is no, right? And I think that there was this implication that my parents may have forced me to take some of the classes I took last year, because I took chemistry, computer science. I took those classes, and I think my friends, thought that my parents said, "Oh, you must take this class to succeed." And also there's a stereotype where your parents will, force you to take certain classes, but also kind of neglect you away from different opportunities, and that's pretty much false, because I had the complete freedom of choosing my classes, first of all, and also just choosing the classes that I was most free in, or the one I was most passionate about, like U.S. history. I'm very interested in that, and the fact that I took that, not just because it was supposed to make my GPA look higher or my report card look nicer, but it was because I was passionate about that. And I just want to point out that in my experience, that perception of what you talked about, if your parents wanted you to do this class, I think that perception was completely erased in my experience of choosing classes in my academic career. I just want to point that out as well.
Yeah, it just gives you the freedom to do whatever you want, which I think allows you to pick your own path when it comes to the future, and especially in college.
But I think it's also important to acknowledge that there are parents out there that
Mm-hmm.
are pushing their kids to go into a certain career path. And while I'm personally not able to talk that much about it, it's also important to understand that where they're coming from, with all this background that we were talking about earlier, coming from less privileged places and all of that. So even in spaces where parents are potentially pushing their children towards a certain occupation, it shouldn't necessarily be viewed as much of a negative thing as it sometimes is in today's society.
Of course. I mean, also pointing out that there's a stereotype, and some of it is real, that your parents come from a place that's less privileged, but their work ethic and how they got into this college really got them to success. And to that point of, I forgot which one said it a while ago, but the fact that you have to pay, I think it was you, I don't know, but it was like repaying your parents back by doing the same ethic, because that's like the formula. I've heard this many times. Follow the formula and you will succeed. But the formula doesn't allow you to pursue your passions, right? And like, for example, if you have the stereotype of a guy that was immigrated to the U.S. from China, and his just pure academic standing and his work ethic got him to where he was as a doctor. Like, that's a stereotype I've heard multiple times, in fact. I just want to point out that that stereotype can sometimes be true in terms of work ethic, but in terms of, I can speak for all of us, the fact that we all are following our passions, and all of us, kind of ignore the stereotype expectations that, could be put on us, and we're the ones taking our own classes, we're the ones that listen to our parents in terms of advice, but our parents don't strong arm us into doing something else. Just wanted to, say that as well, in my personal experience. So, we talked a bit about AAPI parenting and just like the styles, traditions, work ethic, and all of that, taking certain classes, like the stereotype says, you have to take certain classes and that formula for success. But to that point, I brought in before, we went into the college topic, about speaking out on mental health I think there's definitely in the 21st century, there's been a lot of exposure towards, focusing on your mental health and, spreading self-awareness about that. And I want to bring back the question on, like, what was a time where your parents, you didn't expect them to, but your parents really, like, were there for you? And I'm sure they're always there for you, but, talking so freely about mental health, that sort of goes against that stereotype of AAPI parents, kind of masking their feelings away and just, like, going through it or just going through that phase. I just want to know your experiences on that.
I mean, during the pandemic, 7th grade was really tough. I mean, my dad had like constant work, and you know how our school was. I mean, for all of us, it was half in person, half at home. And at home, I was like really struggling, and my dad could really see it. So, it was almost like it was really enlightening because I didn't expect him to give me that help, and we reached out for like I had a good support system at home, so we reached out to some people, and I eventually got the help I needed to like get back on the right path. So I don't know if it's the same with you guys, but yeah, I mean the pandemic really I guess broadened my view on mental health, especially in the Asian community.
Yeah, I can also speak out from my experience. I think it was 2 years ago for finals. Finals period sucks. I'm sure everyone agrees with that. You study your butt off and you get a grade, and it doesn't matter if it's good or not. I mean, it has to be good. That's what the stereotype says, or whatever expectations that have been put on you. Basically, I had a huge expectation, the fact that I would have to ace all of my tests as like the bare minimum, right? Turns out 2 years ago that was not the case. So I worked my butt off, clearly, and I didn't get the test score I wanted to, and at that point, it just felt like there was like no hope for me. I was like useless, I was hopeless, and I didn't speak to my parents about this, one bit during the studying process, but after I got my test grade back, I really showed lament. I was like grieving a little bit because I was so sad about my test scores, right? But what I thought was surprising to me was the fact that my dad, like, he likes to push me a little bit, but I never expected him to say after that process, like, I thought he was going to be disappointed of me the way I did on my test. That wasn't the case at all. Because what he said was very, very important in terms of, the process is more important than the result. The journey and the process that you go through to study and get the knowledge you need to succeed on the test. And if that doesn't happen, like, that's fine. That's life, And that was something that first of all, it was very beneficial to me, definitely helped. But also, it was something I didn't expect from him, because what I've known from his past experiences and the fact that he got into a good college just based on after 10th grade, oh my God, I need to lock in. And so he spent his day on the desk doing studying, tutors, everything like that, and just thugging it out and just getting the best score he had to get into college. And I thought that my dad would be disappointed in me in the fact that I didn't do good on my test scores, right? Because I feel like that would be his mentality if he didn't do good on his test scores, and his dad would say, why didn't you study harder, or why didn't you do this method, or how come your friends got a better grade than you did? And I just think that bolstered up my mental health so much, especially during that time period. And I think that speaking out and understanding that sometimes life doesn't go where you want it to go, but that's just life, and going through that process and learning from your mistakes is ultimately the most important lesson to be learned.
In my experience as well, I feel like a lot of the times I tend to be harder on myself than my parents are on me when it comes to tests and not doing as well as I wanted to. And one important thing that they really helped me with is understanding it's not the end of the world, and especially when it comes to tests, it's one test. There are so many others you could make up for it, and even if that test still ends up mattering, it's not the end of the world, and it's not going to be the difference maker in the rest of your life. It's not, because sometimes right after you get that bad grade, it feels like, I've really messed up now, what am I meant to do? Yeah. And it's not like that, and that's something my parents especially helped me realize, which was especially important for me.
I think in my personal experience, I don't know if Ian or Ryan can relate to this, but my parents made sure that I really adjusted to the school, and I made new friends, because it was pretty hard to go from living in a really populated city to going into like the suburbs. So I had to make a lot of new friends, and my parents were like really there for me. to make sure that whatever I needed, they would give me, and whatever attention they would give me, that I really fit into the community. So yeah.
But like you moved in during the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like after the pandemic. When did you move in? Like.
Yeah, when did you come? When?
My first year was 8th grade.
Was that right after the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
No, but there was
like,
still
that
hybrid
was
for the first
2021.
year. Yeah.
That was 20.
That's
Oh,
That was
Yeah, we were still
2021. So
zooming, yeah.
the summer it got bad
Alright.
Yeah.
Okay.
because the Omicron.
Alright, just double check. Just double check.
No, I totally agree, man. I mean, with the pandemic just going in, and I spoke on this like for half an hour, for 24 hours on the last podcast, but it deteriorated my mental health just based on the fact that I didn't have social experiences and I didn't interact with my friends and all that. But I also want to point out that my parents, they were there for me, and it's like I don't want to say it's corny, but they were like my biggest support group. They were like kind of my therapy in that sense, because when you were stuck at home and maybe first of all, I didn't get the grades I wanted to in pandemic, okay? And when that happened, my parents were kind of my support group, where they were there for me because I couldn't see my friends because we were all wearing masks and staying shut in at home every single day. So my parents being there for me as well also ushered in a new a new idea for me, the fact that no matter what happens, my parents will like never be disappointed in me, in that sense of if you like fail or not, if you don't like accomplish what they wanted you to do. And that stereotype of the fact that, oh man, like why did you get this grade, I'm so disappointed in you, that feeling of disappointment, that stereotype definitely doesn't exist in my world, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, and I think also considering our parents' backgrounds, like for example, like my parents obviously come from Mexico, but like in Mexico, at least when they lived there, like mental health was like not a topic of discussion whatsoever. You understand? Like either like you're working or like you're doing something that's wasting your time. At least like in my parents' financial situation, that's how it was. So like my grandpa, mi abuelo, he owned a paint factory. He started a paint factory, and sometimes like he came home late. So like one night he got mugged. Like right in front of my dad, like right in front of my dad.
Yeah.
And like my dad couldn't talk about it. Like who was he gonna talk about it to?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that happened like to people just normally. At least in the area where my dad lived. So, and like now we're talking about like the pandemic and stuff like that. Like I feel like it's dwarfed in comparison almost. Yeah. But like to see where they came from and to like like how do they like have compassion for like our situation, you understand? Like even like the fact that they're willing to look at us and like not call us like crybabies, like I feel like that's crazy. Like for me during the pandemic, like I think it's like crazy that I even passed like 7th grade. Like I think I failed half my classes. Like I did not do any assignment that year, I swear to God. But my dad, my mom, they were both there for me. It was cool, and they were awesome. Obviously, considering the circumstances they grew up in, probably nothing compared to mine. But yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I feel like is also especially interesting is there's a difference in terms of the vocabulary used when talking about mental health in today's society compared to their society. And while those same ideas might not necessarily be expressed in the same way, I still feel like there is a support system. And one thing that's always especially important is support system. And at least for my family, that idea of family is especially big. And in terms of having support and working your way through your mental health problems, that phrasing isn't typically used, but there's that idea of go spend time with family and make sure that you're feeling happy, make sure that you're feeling confident, make sure you're feeling good in your life. And it might not be the same vocabulary, but I feel like some similar ideas are there in terms of what's going on with our lives and how our parents are dealing with our mental health.
Like going back to what you guys were saying about like taking tests and like not doing so well in them, and your parents like were like trying to comfort you. In my experience, when I was living in the city, I think it was like 5th grade, I studied my butt off for this test to get into a school. And it was like a really big, prestigious school in New York City. And I had a tutor to help me write my essays because I was really bad at writing essays, and I still am. But I didn't end up doing that well on it, and I didn't get into that school. And my parents, even though they spent like a lot of time, a lot of money, trying to help me pass and get into that school, they comforted me and they're like, "It's fine. It's not the end of the world. You know, you can get into another school." And there's a lot of other schools. It's not going to affect like what career path or how you do in life. It's just one test. It's not the end of the world, right? And it was very comforting to know that like even though I failed, like even though I failed, it wasn't the end of the world, and I could still live on, right? I could
Stuff.
No, but I feel like that reassuring factor is so like it's so fulfilling to hear because they accept. I mean, obviously they're gonna accept you, but they will help you to, I guess, better yourself and grow because you obviously failed what you wanted to do, but you know they're gonna help you get past that, and there's gonna be more opportunities for you to do what you want.
Yeah, I mean, I heard one of the terms are just about you're spending all this money for, let's say, a tutor, or you're applying to a school, and the fact that you just didn't get in. It feels frustrating because before I got into the school, before high school, like my school right now, before I got into my school, there was a couple other schools that I got rejected from, and it was a school I really wanted to go to. And let me tell you, the application like price was pretty, and the amount of money we had to spend for like trips and stuff, for interviews and all that, because the school was far away, and the fact that I didn't get in was just devastating for me because knowing that my parents, went with me, they were with me this entire way, and they supported me and they helped me with the interviews, they helped me with the studying for the test and just getting your grades up and all that, being there, and the fact that I let them down, like, damn, that was just, it was really hard for me. But I mean, obviously it was fine because I got into the school that I got into and the one I'm attending right now. But understanding that your parents are putting like money into you, or they're helping you, with funds, or just being your support group because they love you. Okay, it's kind of corny, but they love you. And the fact that I felt that feeling of discouragement, saying after I got rejected from my first school, I said, "Oh man, this is useless. Like I just wasted all this time and money for nothing." Like my parents were there saying that we went through this because you wanted to go through this school. It's not about our funds, or it's not about how much time we spent just to try to help you get into the school. It's about like how much we love you and how much we support you. And just that feeling of reassurance, as you said, was ultimately the most helpful thing that happened for me during that application process before I got into the school I am attending.
I agree because, I mean, when I was studying for that test, my dad put in like a lot of money. I had a tutor. I went to this course that was like an hour away in Queens, and the comforting part was that my dad, he said, like, even if you don't get into this school, you might learn some things, and that can improve for later on in life. And he said, like, even if you only get like 5% better by taking this course or by having this tutor, I'll still pay that money for you and that fee just so that you can get better.
Yeah. I also just want to go back to that you said about, taking the test, and even though you spend a lot of money, you're only going to get slightly better. I think one of the main, reassurances and the reasons that my parents, could have spent that money for that tutor is the fact that they gave me opportunities to try. And I'm just going to go back to that, the idea of being privileged and the fact that, we have a lot of opportunities. I think our parents giving us, because in a lot of situations, some parents don't have that opportunity. And the fact that we are where we are right now, and the fact that we have more opportunities that compared to their childhood, is because they were giving us the ability to try, or giving us the ability to do what they couldn't do when they were our age, right? Taking that test and just getting a slightly higher score was even more exciting for my parents, just because the fact that I improved, the fact that I tried, and the fact that I studied hard and got even if it was so slight or minuscule, like the fact that I still got a good result, that was also a reassurance, especially during that process I talked about earlier. And I think that expectation that sometimes we put on ourselves, saying that, oh, our parents expect us to have a 20% increase on one test because we spent this amount of money, or we spent this amount of time helping you prepare for this test, and the fact that you didn't get that improvement or get that big of an improvement, that expectation was completely crushed, especially as I gone through middle school, just because of the fact that when I did this test, when I was applying to that school, in my personal experience, when I took that test, the fact that we spent money on tutoring, obviously, for that test, and getting that score and getting that reassurance, the fact that you can keep going, we're gonna still support you, and we're not disappointed in you, even though you improved just like a slight bit and not as much as we wanted you to. The fact that we're still gonna support you and we're gonna take off that expectation or not be disappointed, I think that was something that was ultimately beneficial. That was super helpful for me, that experience.
I mean, one last important thing to really talk about in terms of our parents and us is that idea of family traditions and how much we might follow them, how much they might follow them, and where that kind of comes into conflict in our lives. Because, at least for me, when it comes to religion and my own religion, my parents are sometimes more strict about it. And I know there are especially families where it's a big part of their lives and their parents' expectations. And while for me, I'm grateful that my parents aren't as pushy as some other parents can be, and they let me follow and believe what I want to believe, even if that deviates from traditional beliefs, even if it isn't something that I think makes sense, they understand that, and I think it's just an interesting thing to talk about. I just wanted to get you guys'.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for bringing that up. That's awesome, because I also want to point out what you said about religion. So this is actually not an experience about me, but this is actually an experience for my dad. I can speak on behalf of him. My grandfather is very, very Christian. Like, he goes to church every Sunday. He's like, I'm not religious, so I don't know a lot about, like Christianity, but I do know that he's very devoted to that religion. And when my father first moved to America, this was a long time ago, and then, he had the opportunity to go and be devoted to Christianity, right? And I just wanted to say that I think this was actually pretty early. Like, this is not my experience, but my grandfather allowed him to, that family tradition was actually a tradition that you could follow if you're passionate about. And I feel like that stereotype of traditions, and they're very strict, and we're gonna like push down some agenda on you. I think that experience with the experience with my father, and the fact that he didn't become Christian because that's not what he believed in, and my grandfather actually allowing him to become atheist or agnostic. I think that freedom and that ability to choose what you want to believe in and not pushing down an agenda, I think that, especially if we're talking about family traditions, that could be said as well, because not every family is going to have like strict expectations or traditions that they will put on you. Of course there's going to be some, but there are some people that think that Asian parents or grandparents will have this agenda and will push down on you, just to, like, or just respect your elders, which is obviously should be a very, very important thing that you do in your family. But that idea of just following everything that your elders say and not, choosing yourself or what you believe in, I think that stereotype's also completely false. But in my father's experience, that is definitely the case.
But I think there's also still some importance to keeping that culture alive and making sure your family culture stays alive with you, and hopefully teach you everything.
Well, I have a question for you, actually, Sid. Like, I know your religion like doesn't like require you. Does your religion require you to be vegetarian?
It's a complicated question, but technically yes.
But are your parents?
No.
Okay. So why did you choose to be vegetarian? Did you feel like?
Felt like it.
Okay.
It's kind of like, that's going into that idea. It's just kind of like my choice. It's my life. My parents.
So it had nothing to do with like tradition.
No.
Okay. I wanted to know if it had like religious affiliation. All right. Cool. So yeah. So on the topic of religion. Yeah. So like Ryan. Well, I guess just Mexico in general is just like very Catholic. Like everybody there is Catholic. Like everybody is Catholic. And obviously, U.S. very diverse in terms of religion. Also, a lot less a lot more relaxed in terms of how you practice. So like there in Mexico, if you live in Mexico, you're going to church every Sunday. You know, you're eating after church. You know, you're staying there for 5 hours with everybody, with the churchgoers, and you know, again, it's like you have to like. It's crazy how they make the adjustment. You understand? 'Cause, like you feel me? Because like they're leaving a country, they're leaving a whole culture behind, and their understanding of a nation or just like their own children, like following a different path. You know, like they've lived their whole lives following Catholicism, and they're willing to let it go because they understand that I might not want to like follow that same path.
I mean, that idea that it's kind of like really different, where my parents grew up and over here was especially prevalent to me whenever my grandmother comes and visits us. She still lives in India, and it's always kind of like she doesn't have much to do, which is such a difference compared to where she lives, because there's that community. There's every person is like family to you.
Yeah.
You can just stop by someone's house and they'll invite you in, give you food, give you tea. But over here, there's like less of that idea, at least for my parents. Our close family friends don't really live nearby, so there isn't as much of that idea. As you can just kind of go to anyone nearby and start a conversation or drop in.
I think another point, like I think a big stereotype in Asian community is like big families and like living together. Like on my mom's side, like everybody lives together. It used to be like under one house, but now like it's like separate houses but in the same city. And I think that big stereotype that everybody has to live together, what do I want to say? My mom kind of like escaped that because she is like the only one in her side of the family that doesn't live in like Pennsylvania. And it's very different from my dad's side, where everybody's super separate. My grandparents live in San Francisco. My aunt and uncle live in Ohio, and we live in New York, obviously. And so it's like, it's different because, I mean, my parents kind of like separated and they broke off from the stereotype by like not living in that one big family. Even though I'm sure that my mom's side would love her to live there, but she kind of like broke apart from that stereotype.
I just want to talk about that big family stereotype again, as you said, Dylan. When I grew up here, I didn't even know I had cousins. So clearly it's not that big of a family. Okay, I just want to make that clear. I met my cousins a year ago. Let me just be clear, okay? That kind of stemmed from, like, there's a family tradition that my family used to have on the mom's side where, you know, every single day, like everyone would like get together and eat hot pot. It's a traditional dish that we eat in Chinese culture. But everyone in her family would just go over to their house and just like there's like 20 people, okay? It's a huge family, okay? But I think I want to point out just something about the generational gap between my mom's generation and just her parents' generation is that like her parents' generation grew up having this big family and having this community that they always would partake in meals, activities, food, lunch, dinner, all that. And when my mom moved, she told me about this like 3 years ago, but when she moved to America with my father, it was, I feel like she felt that kind of sense of like abandonment, of that she's abandoning her community and her family, you know, for my father, and just to have a small family. And I didn't grow up with the tradition of having, you know, big dinners with our family because we were honestly I was never that close with that side of the family. But I want to point out that this may not be in some cases true for a lot of you guys, but the fact that my mom and dad grew up with a small family and the difference of having that small family compared to that big family, like you talked about being together in a community. Like my mom and my dad found community within, you know, their friends and a small knit group of just people. And I just also want to point out that there was a huge difference in tradition, or not, I would say tradition, but ideal ideals in terms of small family and big family between my parents' side and my grandparents' side.
Yeah. It's the same deal in Mexico. Like, you know, like my mom's side, family lives like basically in like the same neighborhood, and every Wednesday and Sunday they just get together the whole day under the same house. And on my dad's side, it's even like closer. Like my grandma, she literally lives like in the same house as my uncle, my aunt, and my cousins. But I was like, when I was growing up, like here, well, I lived in Miami, I guess. But when I was growing up in Miami, like I had all these like kids in school that like every weekend or like every like month, they were like, oh, I'm gonna go visit my cousins. I'm gonna go visit my grandpa. I'm gonna go visit my grandma. She's gonna bake me cookies, whatever. And I'm here like I visit my grandma and my grandpa each side like once a year, you know. So it's kind of it was kind of tough growing up like that, and it was obviously tough to like forge bonds that you usually would if you have like your grandma or your grandpa living like right next to you, or like an hour away. So it's kind of like a cultural bridge like that I'm just starting to get across, but like it was tough growing up like that, but I feel like it's gotten better. We've had more interaction. They've come to New York. It's cool, but you know.
Yeah, and I think that same idea is definitely true for me, at least in terms of my extended family. They kind of live, a lot of them in India, but then I have family in Australia, used to have family in the Middle East, and they're all over the world, so I can't see them every year. At least when I used to live in Singapore, when I lived there, at least it was not too long a flight to go visit India, visit my family. I could feasibly do that every single year without too much of a pain. Every summer I was able to go and visit them. But then we came to the US, and especially after COVID, I haven't gone back to India since then, and it kind of sucks not being able to see my family, and I think that's especially nice in living, if you were to live in that large family household. I don't have experience with that, but it's just, I feel like there's not as much connection to my grandparents, to my cousins, as there were in earlier generations, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when you mention Singapore, first of all, let me say that my entire mom's side lives in Singapore, every single one of them. So, and my mom was from Singapore, right? So let's be clear, the flight from New York to Singapore is how long again?
24 hours.
24 hours. It's a long flight, okay? And let me say, when I'm growing up, I am not going on that flight. Let me be clear. So, growing up when I was younger, that connection from like a big family, or what I heard from my grandparents about, oh, we would go every day, we sit down at night and, you know, talk and feast and all that in Singapore, and the fact that I was all the way over here in New York, it just felt like I was missing out on a lot of stuff. But when I grew older, obviously now I visit Singapore pretty often, and I kind of get that community together and go like meet with my big family and just and my cousins for that first time. But I also just wanted to point out that like the geographical like locations of like, you know, your families can really affect you, especially me, when I was growing up, in terms of not having that big community. Like just being so far away from your family can really impact you, in the fact that, you know, you grew up with a small community, but you feel like you're missing out, or you don't have that cultural bridge or like bond with, you know, your other family. And that idea of family, you know, spend time with your family, that means spend time with, you know, a community, spend time with, or eat dinner, or do activities with your family. And the fact that I just couldn't do that on a daily basis, or on a regular basis, even once a year when I was younger, that was really that made me feel isolated in a sense. And I feel that growing up with a small family, in contrast to a big family, especially through my elementary to middle school years, I wouldn't call that a generational gap, but I would just, honestly, for me, that was just me growing up a little bit differently. And I feel that just my parents and my brother sometimes wasn't enough as a family, but as it turned out, it definitely was. Like, they were the only people I needed, but I definitely felt something missing, like in a family or a big community type way.
Yeah, and on that point, like if we feel like the effects of not living with like our extended family, imagine how our parents feel. You know, like that's their moms, their dads, it's their parents, their sisters, their brothers. And I think that adds to what Ian was saying, like to the fact that we kind of have to repay that. Like they literally picked up and they left their actual family, like their immediate family, to live here. So, you know, it's kind of adding to what we have to pay back to almost, you know.
Yeah, I also I could definitely relate to Ollie's story. I had a lot of friends who kept saying every weekend or every day, oh, my grandma's gonna bake me something, I'm gonna go visit my uncle, I'm gonna go visit my cousins, I'm gonna hang out with my cousins. And I never really had that because while they weren't in a different country like you guys, they were in a different state, and it wasn't something that we normally did. It was probably once every few months, right? And it definitely was harder to build bonds with my cousins because one, they were older than me, and two, they were all hanging out, living under the same roof, and it was really hard to hang out with them because every time you saw them it would be a whole new time and a whole new person, right? And for my other side, for my dad's side, I haven't seen my cousins in a few years. I think I went to one of them their graduation, but I haven't seen my grandparents in multiple years because they live on the other side of the country. So it's definitely harder to make bonds with your family, even not even extended family, but even your close family, just because of geographic location. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to wrap everything up. Any more points? You guys want to say anything on the family aspect? I just want to wrap up here just in terms of, we talked about parenting and family traditions and the fact that we live so far away and all this stuff about our parents. I just want to give you guys a scenario or a final question I want you guys to ask. First of all, when I was young, I felt very isolated, right? As a middle school person, I was isolated. I was in my room, and I didn't feel that connection with my family, but I also felt the fact that because my family left their home country just to come here, that expectation that we talked about earlier about always having to succeed and using that formula that they gave us to kind of do well in life or to do well in the future or to get this job or do well in this test, that kid, that past version of me definitely needed some advice. And I can tell you that some listeners around here can probably relate to what I'm saying. And I just wanted to ask you guys, what advice would you give to kind of, bolster not just your mental health, but your self-identity in terms of managing that expectations and also finding your support group in terms of your parents and just finding that relationship that I found with my parents. It's a hard question, but I just want to hear your advice on that.
I mean, I guess I'd kind of just say to, in some ways, just be open and don't fall into because a lot of the times, as we were saying earlier, it's society's perceptions of our relationships with our parents that's more damaging than anything that actually happens, and it's not a really true aspect of that relationship. So don't fall into that trap of believing what other people say about what your life should be like, about what your parents should be like, and kind of just be open and be yourself with your parents. That feels kind of
That's
of course.
That's 100% true.
But I feel like a lot of times people change how they act around their parents, and I feel like it's important for your parents to know who you actually are, and that's especially important for helping them help you.
I mean, adding on to Sid, I feel like it's just better to truly express what you think than just keeping it in, because at the end of the day, it's just gonna make you feel worse in a sense, and you won't you won't feel great. And I feel like talking to your parents with your true self and telling them what you need is really beneficial for you throughout your whole life, building strong connections with them. So
Yeah, I mean, just being true to yourself and sharing your passions and understanding what you want to do and hopefully getting your parents to support you in what you do. I think getting that support factor in from your parents is probably the best thing you can do, because not only does that lift that quote unquote burden of you have to get good grades and that expectation put on you lifted, but it also allows your parents to help you support you in your passions and what you want to do in the future. So not only just be true to yourself, but also share what you want to do, man, and just and also just be them and be near them a lot and just talk to them, and having a good and open relationship with them is also very, very beneficial as well.
And I want to widen that, not just your parents, also especially for me, my sister. So it's not just your parents, it's your entire family.
Yeah, of course.
yeah. And I feel like it's nice to have a nice balance in life of what you enjoy doing. For all of us, I think we like playing sports, right? It's a nice break away from education, these expectations that we have to meet, So it just allows you to be rather free than caved in and like you have to log in basically. Like you just have to do your work. But then just sports or just doing something that you really like, enjoy, like spending time with friends, just allows you to escape that, I guess, expectation of education.
So advice I'd probably give to my younger self would probably be like, your day moves on. So I always stressed about like the smallest things, the smallest issues, and I think that the biggest thing that I would tell myself is that like you don't need to worry about these small issues, because in 5 years, in a year, you won't remember anything about that. And yes, there's gonna be times where you might need to worry about it. You might need to worry about these issues, but when you're younger, and these small issues arise, like tomorrow, you're probably not even gonna remember what happened. So just like live your childhood the way that you want to. Don't worry like what you get on this test. It's like second grade, so they don't really matter.
Yeah.
So just move on. Like put the test in the past, and like you can continue your future.
Yeah, I'd probably say something similar to that. Like, when you're young, you kind of have like this tunnel vision. Like, you're the only thing that matters. You understand? Like, everything you do, like that's everything. That's everything.
Sure.
That's everything to you.
Yeah.
And as you grow up, you start to the picture starts to widen. You start to see.
What you do in that moment is gonna affect everything that you do.
That's
Yeah,
what you
exactly.
think.
Yeah,
That's your mentality. But once you grow up, you understand there's bigger things at work. You know, you're not the only thing that matters. I am. But yeah, no. That's probably what I'd say.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that's a pretty a great, fantastic point to wrap up on. Thank you all, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the OCA Youth Podcast, and we'll see you again next time.